Dante John Nomellini, manager and co-counsel for Central Delta Water Agency. We understood our instruction to combine our comments on both topics, so I will deal with the curtailment as well as the temporary urgency change. Of course, our concern is very high with regard to curtailment of water diversions in the Delta. We believe the water supply in the Delta not only includes flows from the east, but it flows from the west, and we have ample water continue to pump in order to farm, and therefore water quality is a concern. Now, I recognize we probably have some legal disputes on that. Just to let you know, we plan to engage on that subject. Hopefully we can get them aired out somewhere along the road so we don't have to fight over it constantly. But we're at the time where under the threat of curtailment, if we haven't done it yet, is really affecting our people and their ability to continue to function. We're very disappointed that we've transitioned, even though our agencies haven't been at the forefront of negotiations over water banking or fallowing in the Delta for compensation. That fell apart, and now we're dealing with an avoidance or landowners' avoidance of prosecution and penalties in exchange for foregoing their water use. I view that as a switch from an economic voluntary banking program to one of reacting to extortion under threat of curtailment and penalty. Of course, I have no enthusiasm for that. As a lawyer, I think it's wrong, and therefore we're going to engage on whether or not your process is appropriate for that. I recognize the curtailment of the Delta notice has not gone out yet for pre-1914s in the Delta or riparians, and I understand from just the brief presentation that decision hasn't been made yet. I suspect it's forthcoming. There are a couple of things I'm going to kind of repeat to you what I've said to you before, that after 2013, I believe that in 2013, the reservoir storage was depleted wrongfully. And the fishery agencies, in my opinion, were a party to it. They said, let the critical year criteria dominate for Delta agriculture, even though it was a dry year rather than critical under D-6041. They didn't say anything about exports. And exports, and I submitted letters to you. Exports, I didn't sue on it. I was leaving the sword in the closet. But exports were taking the same water that could have been stored for cold water protection for fish. And that to me was wrong. We hear about water and storage being allowed after the notice of curtailment or as of the date of curtailment as if it's a sacred cow. Just because it's stored in the reservoir doesn't mean it's stored water. The projects have been capturing behind the reservoir water that would otherwise be natural flow to the Delta. Particularly important would be like in April or March, because it would flush the Delta, and of course our concern is water quality. Whatever salinity control is, you kind of dictated that, but that water is actually natural flow in our view that would have come down fresh in the source of water for our farmers, and we viewed the law to provide for salinity control and a balancing of that by letting people store that water in the early spring months in exchange for some benefit water quality-wise in the summer. So that's how we rationalize it. So if you let them take that away and you curtail us later, we view that as a serious wrongdoing, and we understand the law. Of course, we don't have agreement with all your lawyers, but we think the Delta Protection Act says you can't export from the Delta unless the Delta is first provided an adequate supply. Now, exports have been going on without a health and safety restriction. We haven't jumped in to stop that. But on the other hand, if they get to do that and then you curtail us, we think that's really wrong. Your staff presented what I think is factually correct, that the adjustments from 2014 to 2015 mean greater exports. If you saw the pie charts, it's bigger. And for the first series of months, from January 1st up to now, the State Water Project has pumped from the Delta 268,779 acre-feet more than in the same period last year. Now, where'd that water go? That water is in San Luis. You know, there's other water in San Luis, but that water is there. So if all of a sudden we start curtailing our Delta diversions, that water, the exporters shouldn't have been able to take that water. They're taking advantage of it unfairly, and I'm not going to attribute why it's occurring. I mean, whether the good reasons or not, the net effect is they've taken water, it's in storage. So that water in storage that came out of the Delta should be available to meet Delta water quality requirements. They can come back in the San Joaquin River. I mean, they've done it as a demonstration project, bringing it down through the Westwood Wasteway. So I view those as examples of what we'd be concerned about in terms of an equitable adjustment. We're not going to just sit back and let a process cripple us while others take advantage, I think, unfairly of it. Now, I've said to you before, I think what we ought to do, and I think you ought to avoid curtailments. Let us sort it out, you know, among ourselves, fight over it. It's not a place for you to go because it's very complicated from a water rights standpoint. It's very specific to location. Now, I'm not saying that just with regard to the Delta. The Delta, I think, is the easiest case because we have water all the time. But as you go upriver, you're getting involved in very detailed, very site-specific considerations that I think rightfully have to be addressed from a water right administration standpoint. So you think you're protecting senior water rights. What I see is the advantage is to the junior water right holder who claims stored water, the two projects. And they have statutory obligations that are not purely water rights. Plus, there's statutory rights that regulate what they do. So in any event, I just wanted to alert you, we're still going to work positively on trying to get a better handle on understanding water use in the Delta. We're sending our checks for the 2 SIMA stations. This effort by our water master to get better information, I found 2 sites in the Central Delta. We're going to cooperate. We're going to do that. We're going to try and be responsive. We thought we helped almost everybody that needed help respond to these information requests and the patents and all that. We'll continue to do that. So as we face curtailment,
I do want to mention, we did have a 97, what were the 97? Yeah.
Yes.
It was a huge response.
Yeah,
We were very
well, we've
successful.
tried
I
to
wanted to
help,
express
and
my
we will
appreciation.
continue that. But as we have to become more defensive, we're going to litigate. We personally think our shot is better in court than it is in front of you because of the hyper-technical nature of these questions, dominated by staff. We know who staff are. We know what their positions are from past events on these water right issues. So we're going to try and stay in court. That doesn't mean we won't be back here. You know, I know you said you thought the board ought to do it, but I mean, quite frankly, we think our best shot is in the courthouse rather than before your board because you're going to defer to staff. Not that you wouldn't go the other way, but these things are so complex. I know what you're going to do. I've only been around all these years. Lost my hair. It's either gray or gone, and my My estimate is that our best shot is in
I
court.
have a question, please. So, you've outlined here that you think we're gonna go forward, which it appears that that's where we're headed, but that you mentioned that you ought to be able to work it out yourselves. So how would
Well,
you structure that?
I think water right holders would litigate amongst themselves. I mean, you've seen the San Joaquin River entities join together, which we signed on too, that said, look, you know, stay away from this, wait till you get a formal complaint. We hear John Rubin come in all the time, you know, beat those guys up and this, that, and the other thing. He hasn't filed anything yet, but he may. And maybe we'll file something that he's interested in. But the parties are well aware, the water right holders. I mean, the people on the Sacramento River that are doing these transfers, we're concerned about the impact of water, groundwater substitution. We didn't bring that to you as a complaint. We mentioned it, but we are litigating the environmental document on the long-term transfer. I'm just indicating to you that how those things are going to get sorted out, other than you people jumping in to the fray on what we view as complicated, site-specific, even document-specific challenges. You may want to join them all, this is okay. But I just wanted to be frank with you, let you know, I do appreciate everybody's interest and the effort that's gone in, a lot of effort, even at staff, but, you know, this is getting real critical. Our guys, you know, this 25% thing, we in the agencies are not going to obstruct it, because people have to take that risk and make that decision as to whether they're going to give up 25% in order to get a non-prosecution type of comfort. I don't know how good that is anyway, but we're not going to interfere, of course, because we can't predict the result. But conceptually, we think it's wrong. We think our rights are senior. We think the statutes are set up to make sure that we come first, that you can't export. You may not be able, you may not want to give us the water that we think we need, but you can't export when we don't have an adequate supply. We think that's the law. And of course, that's kind of an incentive on the projects to try and hammer out a solution with us. You know, we've tried to get some kind of contractual situation because we'd rather have more security. We've been unsuccessful over the years, and there's no mechanism for us to force an arbitration or a good faith negotiation. The statute puts that leverage on no exports, we think. That's where the leverage is. And it doesn't mean we're satisfied, but they can't take water out of the Delta unless this thing's resolved. Anyway,
Thank you.
those are my comments. Thank you very much.